Hello, everyone. So usually we do these live via Facebook, but today we're blessed enough to have Father Fr Hasse here with us.
Greetings.
He's here from Michigan. So what do you do in Houghton, Michigan?
Cool. Yeah, so I have a couple different hats that I wear. I'm the pastor of St Albert the Great University Parish, which is a parish which serves Michigan Tech University. And then I pastor St Anne's Parish in Chassell. The two of them are kind of linked together. And then I also am the Vocation Director for the diocese. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And it was fun because on their Facebook page, they had a really great time lapse of them making a snow chapel. Or
Yep.
what was it?
Yeah. So St Als is a pretty vibrant place. And one of the things that's very unique to Michigan Tech is we have a winter carnival every year. And so we are involved in that in a lot of different ways. The all-nighter snow statue competition is one of the kind of classic events there where you build a snow statue overnight. But we also, about 5 years ago, started building an ice chapel. So we build a big kind of, we don't put a roof on it yet. We haven't figured that out, but we build kind of a chapel with walls and a sanctuary. Then we build an altar with a big piece of ice cut out of Lake Superior. And it's a lot of fun. We build that all through January into the first week of February. And then once Winter Carnival week happens, then we have a series of masses in it. We call them the ice masses. So
that's really cool. Yeah, it's been nice to follow that on their Facebook page. And then also, it's really great just to hear how the Holy Spirit guides people. So how has the Holy Spirit guided you in your life to become a priest?
Yeah, so I was a cradle Catholic, went to Catholic school, was really blessed by kind of K through 8 Catholic education. As I got to high school, I wasn't terribly oppositional. I didn't fight going to Mass. I think I realized as a young adult looking back that it never occurred to me that not going to Mass was an option. So I never thought to fight about it because I didn't think I was going to win. And then I had a really powerful retreat experience as a junior in high school. So the Cursillo movement from Spain is kind of the mother movement of like all of pretty much the encounter retreats. So it's been kind of adapted, rebranded, renamed, both by Catholics and non-Catholic Christians. So Teens Encounter Christ, Koinonia, Kairos, Kyrex, the Awakening series of retreats. Those are all versions of the Cursillo movement adapted to youth or young adults. And so in our diocese, we have kind of a local adaptation. Apparently it came to us from Sioux, Canada. So I don't think it exists there anymore. But so our Youth Encounter movement is probably similar to Tech. I've never worked with Tech directly, but many people are familiar with that. So that retreat weekend really made a big impact on me. Among other things, I came back to confession. So I presume I went to confession after my first confession, but I don't have many clear memories of it. Made a good confession that weekend as a junior, and that really made a big difference for me. So in the aftermath of that, I began to pray every day. I began to meet with a group of guys once a week for kind of a prayer meeting. I began to go to the daily Mass more often, and by God's grace, I've stayed close to the sacrament of confession from then until now. And so it wasn't long after that. So that was February of 1995 when I was a junior in high school. And just in the months after that, after communion, especially at that real quiet daily morning Mass, the question began to rise up in my heart, what if God's calling me to be a priest? And quite frankly, then and for quite a few years after that, I was mostly just afraid of that. So I spent a decent amount of time and energy just trying to kind of be like, push that away. Don't want to think about that. Once or twice I talked to a priest about it. I took a couple little faltering steps around a more active discernment. But for the most part, I kind of tried to avoid it. Father Joe Gua, who's still a priest in my hometown, a long time, very faithful priest, he would take a group of my buddies and I out to lunch, and we would say, remember guys, don't sign on the dotted line. So I'm the only one who did, at least as a priest. So there was kind of from 95 and then until all the way through college, I was real active in campus ministry. I went to Purdue and studied forestry and Spanish and was real active in the campus ministry there, St. Thomas. Real blessed by my involvement there. Again, once or twice kind of nibbled at a little bit more active discernment. I did for a little while think a little bit about the CFRs, the Friars of the Renewal. I did a little bit of exploration with the Midwestern, with the Central Province of Dominicans, but never really with any real seriousness. And frankly, as I look back, with any real openness of heart. As I finished college, I went into the Peace Corps. My parents were Peace Corps volunteers, and so one of my sets of aunts and uncles were, and my little sister later joined the Peace Corps, so there's kind of a family tradition. So I spent about 3 years in Central America, in El Salvador, and I was very active and busy in college. When I moved to Central America, especially after training was pretty busy, but when I got to the village, just getting to know people, my life slowed down a little bit and got a lot quieter. And one of my good buddies, Father Adam Mauman, he's a priest in the Diocese of Lafayette in Indiana, he had given me a breviary as a kind of a graduation present from college. And so I began to pray the Liturgy of the Hours with some regularity. And I just began to give the Lord more time and space to speak in my heart. And first, he gave me a gift of kind of trusting that whatever his plan for my life was, it would be a good and beautiful plan, the best plan. And I had believed that kind of intellectually for a long time, but obviously that journey from kind of saying, yes, that statement is true, to that, like, I'm willing to kind of stake my life on its truth, that was a bit of a journey. And I think that spring after I started Peace Corps, that would have been the spring of 2002, so 7 years after the retreat, pretty quickly I went from kind of being afraid to kind of trusting. The Lord just gave that as a gift, and then trusting, it became clear that I needed to at least try seminary. So I did my application actually through the mail, and I came home on a visit during a Thanksgiving break to meet with our bishop at the time, Bishop Garland. And so then I started seminary in the fall of 2004. So yeah, it was kind of I wouldn't say it was a rocky journey, but I would say like most of that time, as I look back in retrospect, I see that there was some awareness of a call to the priesthood in my life. But I also see that I was avoiding it. And so once I actually began to ask the question with a little bit more openness in my heart in my journey, that going from there to being kind of like, I think this is what I need to do, happened pretty quickly. And in my journey in seminary, I was really blessed. I spent 5 years at Mundelein in Chicago, and really had a tremendously positive experience there. In my journey, a lot of the like resisting God's call had happened before I started. And so my own sense of being where I was supposed to be was pretty consistent through seminary. I know fine, faithful priest brothers who they were maybe more courageous in answering the call more quickly, but then the battle kind of for them happened a little bit more during the seminary years. So, each person's journey is unique. And then, I've been just blessed since I was ordained in 2009. I always wanted to do campus ministry, hoped I would get to do that. I always, even as a seminarian, was blessed to be involved in some vocational ministry, but I did not imagine I would get to do that as much and as immediately. So my first 2 years I was doing campus ministry at NMU in Northern Michigan, University of Marquette. And then for the last now over 6 years, I've been at Michigan Tech. So yeah, I've got to be back in kind of the same environment, which was such a blessing to my life as a college student.
And you've had quite the life experiences. Do you have any advice for anyone watching this right now?
Yeah, so I would say I just think I still struggle to make prayer the sufficient priority it needs to be in my life, but I've never once spent time in prayer and then regretted it and said, oh, that time was wasted, So I think that's such a basic category. And our world is noisy and busy, and it's easy to stay distracted. And so I think just the primacy of prayer. So if you desire to know the Lord, if you desire to know His will for your life, that will not happen without that choice of prayer. And it is a sacrifice, right? I mean, in saying yes to prayer, we say no to the other things we could do with that time. So, a question I often pose to college students who are kind of sensing that call to prayer but struggling is just to ask the question, can I accomplish more with God than I can accomplish without Him? Right? And it's a real question, right? But I think you don't have to walk a journey of faith very long to realize that it's true, kind of as a statement that I'm going to accomplish more with God. But then we kind of have to grapple with, am I actually living out of that truth, right? Or does my life look like I believe that I'm going to get more done without Him, right? And so that's not a question I would say that's over in my life, right? Like I have a lot of responsibilities, and so it's easy to fall into that trap of kind of putting my efforts before God's kind of time with God. But as I grapple with that, I know where the call lies, and I see the fruit when I'm generous with God, right? I see His grace at work. The other thing I would say, there's such a deep need for healing in our world, and I encounter in the hearts of young people, lots of hurt and fear, woundedness for all kinds of different reasons. And I think habitual sin, right? Struggles in relationships or with purity, struggles with kind of, wounds from family history. And I think a lot of times one of the enemy's most effective attacks is discouragement or even despair, And I think one thing I perceive as I walk with people is that, there may be a specific kind of overt place of struggle, right? Somebody's, struggling with some sin, or they're struggling with a broken relationship in their life. And that's kind of very much on the surface, very obvious to them that that's an area of struggle. But I think kind of like the stiletto that the enemy strikes with that really is even more deadly is that lie that you can't overcome this, right? This couldn't be healed, right? That you couldn't be free. And I think it's not always obvious that attack a lot of times is more subtle and therefore maybe more dangerous. So I often think that as we seek to open our hearts to the Lord's grace, or as we seek to accompany other people, a lot of times that word of hope, that witness of hope, that encouragement is kind of like the condition without which, right, significant growth in whatever the area of struggle or woundedness, it kind of gets limited by that. So I think, so I believe that there's a great need for a renewed hope in the Lord's power to kind of heal. And I believe that's possible because I see it in my own life and I see it in other people's lives. I would say if anybody's really struggling with woundedness in their life of one sort or another, one author who I find tremendously compelling is Dawn Eden.
Oh, Dawn Eden. I've heard a little bit about her, yeah.
Yeah, so she has a very dramatic story, a lot of a big journey in her life. And her writings are really powerful because she's done quite a bit of theological study, has taught in seminaries, and I think she combines a pretty rich, she's really grounded and rooted in the tradition in a deep way, but she articulates that in a way which is pretty practical and accessible. So she just came out, her memoir just came out, Sunday Will Never Be the Same. And so that's quite a good book. So that's something I've been reading recently that I find powerful.
That's good. Another really good healing author that I found is Henry Nouwen. Yeah. Like I love reading Henry Nouwen. He hits the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's just powerful to hear other people's journeys and to realize that people through whom the Lord has worked in remarkable ways, needed healing, needed growth in their lives too. Sometimes people think, to serve the Lord or to live my faith in a vibrant way, I'd have to be somebody for whom it was easy. And I would just say, like, which of the saints? Right? Like where do we observe that in the tradition? We see it in the scriptures themselves, right? Like the Lord's struggles and the mystery of his incarnation. We see the apostles' struggles. We see the people who Jesus called to himself struggling. And so I think, I think we're invited certainly to this like resolve and courage and persistence in overcoming struggles in our lives, but also just to remember that the Lord's not waiting for some kind of moment when everything's been fixed, but he's with us now, kind of as we're walking in the journey.
Very true. Well, it's been wonderful spending time with you. Thank you so much for coming by the Mother House.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And what's your Facebook page if anyone wants to follow you?
Yeah, so our campus ministry, the website is mtucatholic.org. That's kind of the portal into everything else. We have a YouTube channel, and then facebook.com/stag, STAG, so St. Albert the Great. MTU, so they can find us there. And we have lots of pictures up from the Ice Chapel and Winter Carnival, and then lots of stuff there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. God bless you, everyone.